There's so many ways we try to connect with others. Maybe it's practicing those hours we log on Duolingo to talk with your neighbors that speak different languages, or the smile we share with someone after they open the door for you. For today's guest, Kaiping Chen, finding and understanding ways of connecting is what fuels her passion for communication.
As a communications scholar, she is always learning from connecting with others, whether it's through her time as a piano player, using music as a medium for connection that crosses language barriers, to her curiosity into how people participate in local government. This passion for connection led her to UW-Madison as an assistant professor in life sciences communication, where she works to connect the communities to learn about how they engage in environmental policymaking.
She'll talk about her path into science communication and share with us some of the amazing work she's doing in community engagement and thoughts on how to make the journey easier for other young faculty in STEM. We're so lucky to have her on to connect with us and all of you folks listening in.
From the Wisconsin Energy Institute and the Great Lakes Bioenergy Research Center, I'm Meg.
And I'm Michelle.
And you're listening to Propelling Women in Power, a podcast about the careers of women in energy at the Wisconsin Energy Institute on the UW-Madison campus and our sister institution, the Great Lakes Bioenergy Research Center.
Let's dive in with Kaiping Chen.
Hi everyone, I'm Kaiping Chen and I am an assistant professor in computational communication from the Department of Life Sciences Communication at UW-Madison.
One of the main questions that you ask is, how can we combine public information to engage with under-resourced people? You said there's a lot of work being done in 3 different topics: democracy, science communication, and data science. Can you explain your research in each of those topics?
Yeah, so thank you for this question. And a lot of my work look into how we can empower especially those people who are under-resourced and underheard to participate in environment policy making. I'm a communication scholar. I look into how we can use deliberation design to either host those in-person events or use digital technology to let people participate in local policy making. The data science part kicks in when we know that when we listen to people after we hear from them in those, in-person or online deliberation, how do we, communicate their voices to local policymakers? How can we analyze, accurately reflect their voices? So this is where I learn about data science, especially thinking about how do we analyze people's, public opinion data in both kind of text format and sometimes in visual format to make sure their voices are amplified in local policy making. So this is where I kind of envision myself putting 3 things together. One is democratic theory, which guide me to think about what does our inclusive dialogue look like, right? What does diversity means in local policy making? So that's the democratic theory. I'm inspired a lot. We can talk more later on. And the second part is data science, which give me a bunch of skill set to really understand what people say. And then the other is really, I'm also a designer. I use human-computer interaction, those website design to think about, we not only can do, deliberation through in-person events, but also some people prefer to participate online. Some people prefer to participate, use text message. So how we can diversify the way we listen to people. So this is the way I see myself putting these 3 things together: democracy, data science, and human-computer interaction designs.
That's an impressive 3-part intersection. Is there a part of your work that is the most exciting aspect?
I think the most exciting aspect is really about, the first is integrating these 3 things together. And this is where I have a background where I first studied political science during my bachelor degree, and then I did a master in public administration, so focusing on public policy. And then I did a PhD in communication and got a certificate in computational social science. So this is really the integration of these 3 things are the most exciting part, is how you can put deliberation designs and, the data science together to really understand what do people say and how to link what they say to the places they live, their neighborhood characteristics of their neighborhood. So the integration is really kind of one of the most exciting part. And the other part where I really, really love is many of the times I do work a lot with local government, work with those fantastic community NGOs, and more importantly, work really directly with the community members. So these kind of the really putting science and environmental communication into practices to work with real people to see, think about how we can empower them to share their voice. How can we empower them to know that they can actually help the local government improve their living environment, right? Make their neighborhood better. This part of the way practical aspect, applied aspect of our working with community engagement is also kind of one of the most exciting thing for me. There are a lot of challenges from there. I'm still kind of learning, but that is really kind of the learning process, handling challenges, really make sure that different stakeholders, local government, community NGO, community member, they can work together to address those challenges is really kind of, wow, excites me a lot.
Yeah, that is exciting. What you were saying about how your background and all those different parts of your education kind of culminated into you working with the community in this more environmental justice space.
Also something which actually brought me to get education in the United States. So when I was kind of like even started in later primary school, actually every summer, I work with the neighborhood association in my hometown, Shanghai. So this is where during the summer you volunteer to help, for instance, help write community board to share community stories of how they do recycling, how they deal with environment. Or sometimes you visit those senior citizens to share stories with them. So for me, it's like since I was a very little kid, I know that I want to do this type of community services, public services. And this is why I also chose political science as my major during the undergraduate, because I want to think about the key question is how can we empower those wonderful people in the communities to participate in making their neighborhoods better, and how to really connect their opinions with the local officials who make those policy. And this is where democratic theory, specifically deliberative democracy theory, is the part which addressed that answer. So this is where I came to the US during my undergraduate, attended a summer school at Yale University, and got the chance to work a little bit with the New Haven mayor's office to really think about, how democracy really work in US, and to continue learning that throughout my PhD degree. So that is actually what brought me to the US, is to understand, to study democratic theory and how people participate in politics.
That was something that you didn't expect, was how democracy worked in the US. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So that was a shocking experience. I did my summer school at Yale when I was 20 years old. And we learned kind of in China, I studied political science. So a famous democratic theorist, Robert Dahl, wrote a book talking about who governs in New Haven. So this is why also drive me to apply for the summer school at Yale, because I really want to see who governs in New Haven. And then after the summer school, I actually attended those town hall meetings. And I sit there, and I recall I'm actually only the Asian person sitting there. And I see that during those public meetings, only the very few people stood up and shared their thoughts. And they are not ordinary citizens. They are people from their interest group. And very few people share their opinions. It's different from what I read on the textbook, what the town hall meeting looked like, what Tocqueville talked about, democracy, America, the school of public spirit. That's very different from what I thought. So then I went ahead to talk to the chair of the board of aldermen in New Haven. I say, can I do a little bit work with you to observe how democracy works in the United States? And then he happened to also study political science at Yale University. So he said, yes, you can stay here for 1 more month to, work with me to see how the legislature work here, how the mayor's office function here. So this is where, I stay there to really see, how do people participate in this kind of town hall meeting, public meeting? How do they talk to the politicians? So this is where the expectation happens is, not many people really visit local government, right? And then on the other side of the space is while I was doing actually PhD later on at Stanford Communications, so my advisor, he conducted a lot of what he called deliberative poll across the world.
And for those of you who don't know, a deliberative poll is like a big group conversation where people come together to discuss important issues in depth and then share their opinions. It's different from a regular poll because people get to hear different perspectives and learn more about the issue before they share their own thoughts. All right, back to Kaiping.
And I was fortunate to participate in one of the deliberative poll in my hometown, Shanghai. So I put them connected with the local neighborhood government in Shanghai. And then this is where I was moderating those small group discussion about the local people from the local neighborhood share their thoughts about how they're gonna make budget to improve environment and other things in the neighborhood. And in China, usually we think about is there's not kind of like a participatory culture, much of the participatory culture. But then during those events, I see people share opinion a lot. Mm-hmm. They just love to talk to the people. So this is where kind of like the question make me wanna address is, it's not about people in US or in China who is willing to participate. It's more about, do you create the space, the structure for people to talk to each other? And how can we create this, helpful deliberation space where you allow people to talk to each other rather than shout angry with each other? So this is where, I did a lot of work in public deliberation theory to think about, let's design it in the correct way. And this also ties to the current work I am doing with the local government and the two community NGOs here about environmental justice. And where we held two events last October, where we brought nearly 100 members from Black and Latinx communities to share about three kind of environmental issues: energy saving at home, extreme heat and health, and tree canopy and green spaces. And for those kind of event, the way we kind of design, how people gonna share their thoughts of these events, it's really, I ask my community NGO, staff, what do you think is the best way to engage the Black and the Latinx communities? So they are kind of like also my teacher, where I learn from them what's the best way to let people feel comfortable to share opinion. So this is where we see that in the Latino community forum, we actually have the Mexican dance during the event. And for the ice breaking, we ask people to put where they come from on a world map, because they are within the Latino community, there are different cultures, subcultures. So we ask people to put on the map to do an ice breaking event. So we incorporate this cultural element into these events. And for the Black community event, we use a style called World Cafe. So this is where the founder of the Urban Triage tell us that, World Cafe is gonna be a way where people love to rotate, spend 20 minutes at each table. And each table is a different topic, so they can share their thoughts, and then they rotate to the next table. So it's kind of like shopping around where they learn and share get knowledge about different issues. So this is where it's kind of still kind of like, for me, is this structure, how we design it matters. And as scholars, it's of course important we learn a lot from the literature, from the theory, what does inclusion and diversity means. But I think it's equally important that we should listen to the community NGO. Every community is different in terms of how people want to share ideas. So this is where, going back to the question you asked me, what is the most exciting part of my work? It's really to think about how I can integrate, those science communication, deliberative democracy theory, how to really put them happen on the ground. And this is where, I have a lot of learning with the local community leaders, the Black leaders, Latino leaders, to know that, how to find a connection between what we think about in the literature and what is really gonna benefit people on the ground.
There was like a thread of meeting people where they're at, where you want to integrate those culturally informed designs into what the science says.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also another thing I want to share is the community engagement work I'm doing now is, it's very important that we held the event last October, right? We listened to people. And then the two key issue is, how can we continue to follow up with people rather than just we brought people together, we listen to them, and then we don't have follow-up. Then you are wasting people's time. They don't know whether they are what they share, how we're gonna use it, how the researcher gonna use it, how the local government, how do they gonna react to that. So this is where like this semester, we have two exciting things which are happening. One is we held another follow-up event with the Latino communities. So my collaborator, NGO collaborator is Wisconsin Eco Latino, a wonderful organization. I encourage you guys to check out. And on March 4th, we brought the same group of people who attended last October's meeting come back. And this is where the Dane County and the city of Madison local officials in the space of energy climate change, they give response to this community member regarding, this is what we heard from you last October. And here are the sets of policy programs, for instance, regarding how we think about deploying air quality sensor, how we're gonna think about working on the urban heat map in Madison look like, and what is your further feedback for our work. So we have this type of follow-up. We do a lot of work after last October. We analyze what people say, and we have follow-up meeting with the local official to help them think about what is the best way to respond to people. So people know that they are heard. What are the next steps? So this is one activity we are doing now, and we want to continue to do that. And the other is we are almost finishing building a digital engagement website. It's a website where we have a lot of questions designed with our NGO partner and the local government, where we want to engage more members from the community. So like in the last October, we brought 100 people. But what about we bring 400, 500 people? So more people, to share their thoughts about what environment justice means to them. And what are their thoughts about how they can improve air quality? What type of green spaces they envision in their neighborhood, and how are they experiencing the extreme heat during the summer in Madison? We have that thing, right? So this digital kind of the tool we are building is for us to think about how do you sustain this type of engagement, especially after pandemic, right? People have different modes, hybrid mode of thinking about how they want to participate. So giving people the opportunity to not just participate in person, but also have a way to participate online. And we are also envisioning we can do some text messages. Some people want to send text message. So diversified way of people to sustain the participation is what we are thinking about doing a lot in this semester. So this is where really the goal is to make sure that people's voices are being listened and reflected in the local policy making, right? And the second is to sustain this engagement, because we want to really empower them. They can't be empowered through one event. If they want to really think about, they can get a lot of useful information, they have the capacity to make positive change in their life, we need to constantly listen to them. So this is where a combination of offline, in-person deliberation and digital, this hybrid way of our civic participation is what we are kind of like designing through this project. And we are applying for more funding to continue this effort of sustain their civic engagement. I think it's very important for us to understand public opinion under the context of intersectionality. It's really, to put it simply, who living where says what. So it's kind of like how what's the relationship between intersectionality and public opinion on environment justice. So this is the paper we are working on.
Something that we've been talking to a lot of the guests in the season on, and we know that there's a lot of disconnect between scientists and the communities that they work with. What specifically motivates you to bridge that gap, and how do we invite others in to bridge that gap?
Yeah, so I think one thing which also motivated me to do the current environment justice, my team and we had a meeting with the local government, the city government and Dane County government way back last spring. And they told us that for them, they really want to listen to the Black and Latino communities to know about what is the living situation of those community members regarding the environment. What do they think about electrification, right? Energy use, tree canopy in the city and the county. They really want to listen because they don't know what people think about. And the puzzle for them is, how can they listen to the people? So this is where me and also the University Alliance, Gavin Luther, who helped me a lot to bring together through this 1 year engagement, try to really is to bring the local government to talk to listen to actually to the community members, and to also learn a little bit about what does the community NGO want. Because we find that a very interesting thing is at the beginning that local officials think a lot about electrification, which is very important. And then what we hear from the community member is a lot of the community members, they cannot do electrification because they are renters, right? They don't own a home, so they cannot really change those things. And some of the people, they will share that they still love gas stove, right? They think the food tastes better through the gas stove. So this is where we see there is a gap between how the local policymakers think about what people want to save energy versus what the community members, need. And also community members, they care a lot about what is the cost. Is that going to increase my utility bill? So this is where dialogue needs to happen. And a continued dialogue needs to happen in order to bring the different sides together to kind of slowly mitigate, right, this disconnection, like what do you say. So for me, as a communication scholar, the role is, let's bring people to talk to each other in a structured setting, in a way where people can really listen and share ideas comfortably with each other. Mm-hmm. So this is where it's actually what brought me to the beginning of this project is, I see a gap in terms of different communication gap. Community members, they don't talk to each other. Actually, one of the things people share with me after the October event is they really love this event because, they now can talk to their peers. They now know that, we guys set the temperature really very differently at home. So this is where the social learning between community members, between the government and the community member, between the government and the NGOs, right? So this is where this dialogue, the goal is to really create this space for continued communication.
You're not only making that space to bridge the gap between all these different stakeholders, but also that it's a space where community members can talk amongst themselves too.
Exactly. This kind of social learning, and people can enjoy themselves. They learn from each other. One of the group during our Latino community forum is people began to share that they have solar panel. And then that person began to share how the person really do the solar panel in the house. And then people say, wow, you can do that. So this kind of the social learning space where people learn from each other regarding, how can they save energy at home? What do they do when it's extreme heat? How to protect their family? So this kind of the knowledge sharing among community members make them, realize that actually people are working, people like me, they are doing small changes to improve their living environment.
Yeah, and that's empowering
That's
too.
actually very, very empowering for them.
Yeah.
And we are doing the same thing again on the digital website where actually we have a part on the website where we tell people, here is what we hear from your peers last October regarding how they save energy at home, how they think about green spaces, and how they protect themselves during extreme heat. And can you share some stories from you, how you do that, right?
Yeah.
So this is where we are also doing this kind of social learning space, kind of a little bit of education sharing between community members. Yeah.
You've talked about how all of your work before has led you to this project that you're doing now. You're majoring in political science to education and communication. That's led you to where you are now. And it's been a path where you keep building on your skills to this culmination in this project that integrates all of them. Along the way, was there any point where you thought that you'd be doing something different than you are now?
I think for me, doing kind of community engagement, or working with helping the local government community member to share their ideas, to really amplify their voices in local policymaking. That's something I always want to do since I was in primary school.
Yeah.
So it's continued to do that. I think the part where I didn't thought about when I was in high school or in college is the part of the role of data science. So when I did undergraduate, when we studied political science, majority of the time we don't do data science. And the moment where I began to realize data science is important is the first year when I was at my graduate school at Stanford. I was working on a project where I want to look into what people share about their life, about their environment on social media. And then I was trying to collect the social media posts. And I found that there are just so many posts on social media where I'm not able to just manually go through each post to understand what people say, to understand what politicians respond to the people. So this is where I began to realize that I need a set of skill set which allow me to automate the process. And this is the time where I began to do the certificate of computational social science, which is really, or a sub-area, computational communication, where it's really to think about how we can integrate communication theory and data science methods, such as natural language processing, computer vision, right? A variety of data science methods to understand public opinion in a large scale and in real time. So that's something which I didn't thought about when I was doing community service, when I was very young, but then I realized it's an important skill set. And this is where also it's a skill set I'm teaching my students. This semester, I'm teaching social media analytics, a course which is open to both the undergraduate and graduate students across the campus. And we have students really from different majors coming to this class. And in this class, I, tell them, how do we think about social media through a critical perspective? But also, I teach them about some of the data analysis, programming skills, so they can know, how can I analyze social media posts? How can I analyze human communication, combining, social science theory with computational methods. So this is where I'm also kind of trying to teach my students to make them aware that data analytics is really an important skill if we really want to accurately reflect what the community tell us.
Did you, along the way, face any obstacles or challenges on your way to becoming a top researcher in your field?
One of major challenge, also kind of like I envision that as opportunity or exciting thing for doing my work, like science communication and community engagement, is really about how do I build trust among the community members. Particularly when I, enter a new city, right? Here, Madison is different from where I studied before, New York City or Palo Alto, very different. Communities are very different. So how do you enter the community to start, to know what they need? That is the challenge about that entry point. Because community members, they won't even trust you. They won't even talk to you if they don't know you.
Yeah.
So the way I'm actually learning a lot, and I actually gain a lot of help, is I did two things. The first is our University Alliance is a wonderful organization. They put me in contact with the local government and they introduced me to community NGOs. And also the South Madison partnership, they also helped me do a lot of connection. So they are the trustworthy person in the communities. So they brought me there, they introduced me there. So that's the kind of key thing. They gave me a lot of support for my community engagement work here. And the other thing I also enjoy and do a lot is there are many community events happening. For instance, some NGOs, they are holding the summer picnic. So I went to those events. I attend those community events. So then the community members see my faces. The community leaders see my faces. So this is where another way I began to learn a little bit more about the communities. So these are the challenges, right? Entry point, and now how do you sustain this trust, right? Because people come to the events, you hold events, the key question they ask me is, how are you going to utilize our information, utilize our opinion? And this is where I need to think about how to respond to them. What is the role of researcher, what I can do and what I'm not able to do. So I need to be honest and transparent to the community members about the timeline of which stage we are at now. So this is a kind of a series of challenges about the trust challenge. How do you first build the trust, establish trust at the very beginning? And then is, how do you sustain that trust? Make sure you don't lose them, right? So I think that's the thing where I'm learning and gaining a lot of help, actually. Learning a lot from like my colleagues at LSE and also from the University Alliance. Yeah, and also another challenge is doing community engagement actually takes lots of effort. So I was sometimes joking with my friends and colleagues that if I just write a computational paper using data science methods, analyze social media opinion, I can do that paper very fast. But then community engagement, it takes very long time to do. And then you can't just say, oh, I can just produce a paper, right? Publication very fast. It takes time and years. And this is sometimes it's not, if we think about strategically, it takes very long time, take triple the effort of just doing purely, let's say, analyze social media. So this is where the challenge is, how do you find the time to do this type of work and to keep your passion, even though you know that publication gonna come slowly, right? Because we have those different ways of, we have those kind of requirements for junior scholars in terms of publication. And doing community engagement work will finally lead to impactful publication, but it takes time. But sometimes the criteria for our, variety of things, doesn't allow us to wait for long. So how do you balance that type of thing? And I think this is also actually the key challenge. And also sometimes doing community engagement, the impact is actually not always in the publication. It's actually in the impact of what things you bring back to the communities.
Exactly.
Whether the government redistribute resources back to the community. And those are the things which are different from the traditional way we evaluate a scholar. What are the criteria for evaluate community engagement work? That is something where might not be in the space of across many institutions. So this is where this type of impact, right, on the community, it takes time because the government won't directly redistribute the resource after they listen. They need to wait for the federal money, right, sometimes. So it takes very long. So this type of impact, how do we evaluate? I think that's a challenge and also a promising thing for institution to address. Is how do we evaluate community engagement scholarship for junior scholar and for other scholars? What's the way to evaluate beyond the publication?
Yeah, I like how you framed it as it's an incredible opportunity because there are so many more people that are engaging in this type of work. Things need to change in order for them to not be left behind, to bring value to the very important work that they're doing, that you're doing. Did you have any mentors that helped you on your path?
Yes, I think I have a variety types of mentors. So the first is at our department, Life Sciences Communication, where every junior faculty member is assigned a mentor, different mentors. So like my mentors at LSE, they give me a lot of help to guide me, to give me the confidence about I'm doing the right work in terms of community engagement. It is valuable. Yeah. So that advice, that kind of encouragement from my colleagues at LSE is really crucial for me.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's really take a lot of time and you need people to tell you to kind of reinforce your belief that community engagement is valuable. You should pursue that. So this is where their advice and encouragement, they also share a lot about their experiences. They are excellent scholar, not only doing science communication scholarship, but also they are doing science communication practices. So they share with me a lot of practices from themselves, how to build trust among different stakeholders. So these are the group of mentors where I really appreciate a lot. And I also have mentors across other institutions, not only in the US, but in other parts of the world. So they are the group of scholars which they often share with me about in this academia as women, how do you navigate through different challenges? And also as young scholar, junior faculty member, how do you think about you create resources and spaces, network for yourself? So these are the other scholars across, everywhere in the world. And also I think the other mentors I really appreciate a lot is my community partners. They are the ones doing community engagement. They are the ones who actually teach me and continue to teach me what's the best way to do engagement on the ground. So they are actually also my mentors.
I like how your mentors, the really big role that they play and the role that you play as a mentee is you're really there to listen.
Exactly, the listen.
Mm-hmm. You do so much working on this community engagement project that you said, takes a lot of time and a lot of intellectual and emotional energy. You're affiliates of like 6 different departments at UW. You're doing all this work, you're teaching on top of that. How do you balance it all?
I think for me is, first, the important thing is I'm a communication scholar. So even if I'm dining outside, having food in the restaurant, I love to talk to people. That's part of my job. So it's actually, I incorporate a lot of my research and thinking into my daily life. So there's really not a way for me to say I balance my work with my daily life, because for me, it's incorporate together. And I also, one thing is I always find the time to give myself enough time to sleep. So I sleep like 8 to 10 hours every day.
Nice.
And to give myself enough energy. And I also love to share my, thoughts, hang out with my friends, my mentors, my colleagues. So this is another way for me to kind of relaxing. And because for me, I'm a very extrovert person. Talking to people is a way for me to relax, like what we are doing now.
Yeah.
So this is where, I kind of try to find an integration of my work and my life.
Yeah. I love what you said about how your work is really just integrated in your daily life. That really speaks to your passion. That's
exactly, yeah. Because a lot of the ideas, some of the ideas inform my research. Things, like graduate school, undergraduate is really through I talk to the community members in the community events. I just chat with people and then I learn, they are encountering this problem in their life. They don't know how to find information to help improve their neighborhood. So these are the research ideas. Many of my research ideas actually come from I talk to people in my life.
Yeah.
So this is why it's integration.
Yeah.
And it's not that, I need to find a balance. This is the time I work. And this is the set of time I kind of relax. For me, it's integration.
On top of that, this is something that's played a big role in your life. I know you play piano. On your website, you mentioned that your playing has helped you build resilience and instilled in you a growth mindset. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
The role of music in my life, which teach me, are really kind of 2 things. So the first is the music, like playing piano, allow me to actually do a lot of cultural exchange when I was a kid and a teenager. So one of the things I did is I joined many of the we call it student arts group in my hometown, Shanghai. And this is where they brought you to different countries or to meet with different people where you share the music with different audiences. So this kind of allowed me to really, again, to use music as an entry point to communicate with different audiences, because people love music. They will sit there and listen. They will kind of get relaxation, get joy from listening to the music. So this is where I actually use that as a way to communicate, understand different cultures of people, not just in China, but also in other countries. And the second thing is, when I started learning piano when I was 3 years old, I want to really play it very well. And I did many competition. And during many of the competition, you're not going to always win the medal, right? Many of the times you are at the stage, you're going to be very nervous. So actually, through doing those competition and the performance, it also teach me about how do you overcome those hurdles, overcome challenge, how do you face failure? Because many of the times, across different points of our life, we're going to experience fail. And many of the times, fail might be the default in our life. So how do you think about those situations? What lesson do you learn about? This is what kind of the music teach me is fail is the default. I know that. But then I know it's fail. I will face it. I'm not fear about that. But I gain some lesson to prepare for my next success.
Yeah. That's a really valuable lesson to learn early on in your life.
Yeah, and also prepare me actually to be a teacher, because you need to be on the stage all the time, right? To teach students, to engage, interact with students, because playing music, many of the time, the performance is not about you are doing a performance for yourself. It's about you are doing a performance is an interaction between you and the audiences. What type of music you want to bring to the audience, and you see their reaction. So this type of interaction and engagement through music performance also give me a variety of skill set to be a teacher, to engage with my students in class.
What do you see as continuing obstacles for women in your field?
One key question for people like women in my field, science communication, or who do computational communication. First is about how do you give them the resources, particularly at their early stage, where they are graduate students or where they are junior faculty member. How do you make sure that they have enough resources to succeed and sustain their research work? For instance, for junior faculty member, doing community engagement work, we need lots of money, continued money, because we need to support the NGO staff who do the work with us. We need to support the community members. So we need lots of money. So how can we get those resources, right? Like, you do grant writing. You need to seek resources for grants from a variety of organizations, right? So this is where I think, how do you tell people about this skill set is very important, and it's something which is a challenge for graduate students and also particularly junior faculty members. And the second thing which I feel a lot is data science, because I work a lot with data science, and data science is still a field dominated a lot by male. How do we actually, encourage people from more diverse backgrounds to learn about data science? Because finally, the way we do community engagement is not about the researcher always gonna be in the community. I wanna build the capacity for the community members themselves to have the skill set to do advocacy later on, to have the digital literacy skill, to have the analytic skill. So how can we build those skill set among those underrepresented communities? So that's also a challenge for me. And one of the effort, we are doing now is, so for communication, we have a association called International Communication Association. So that's one of the largest association in our field. And they have different division. I'm the officer for the computational methods division, and I'm chair the DEI task force. And for us, it's really, we want to think about, first is, how do we actually attract people from diverse backgrounds to learn about computational methods, to know that data analytic skills is very helpful to them. Because many of the times they think about data science programming, they immediately get scared. So how can we teach them that it's not a scared skill set? You can actually learn step by step to build their confidence. So this is something, we are working around, thinking about in terms of the division, institution level, what we can do to tell people that not only analytic skill is important, but what are the step-by-step process to learn and get this skill set. Yeah.
So you've been asking those questions. What are the possible solutions or strategies that you found that do invite people in?
So what we do is we are planning to think about. So for instance, as a teacher, I started doing data science, right, and analytics in my class, and I teach them. I give a lot of hands-on exercise workshops to work with my students through coding together. And they will feel a lot of challenge. And I tell them, I share my story about how I also feel those challenges when I was in graduate school, undergraduate, and how I overcome them. And I always give them the confidence about, you can learn that, but just to take the steps slowly. So I do a lot of these kind of in-class workshops about that. And we are also thinking about in terms the association division, computational methods division. We want to ask people, what are their preferred way of learning computational methods, rather than we assume how they want to learn. So we are in the process of collecting community opinions, right? So we have scholars who target people in underrepresented groups. And we ask them, what do you think? What are the research topics you are studying? And how do you think data science might help you answer what question? And what are the resources you need from us? So we begin from more bottom-up approach to understand what they need, where they see the value. And then we're going to think about as the division level, what we can do step by step, again, to pair those resources, give those resources back to those communities.
Yeah, I see that same idea, again, listening to people and asking them what they need.
Exactly.
Figuring out how to give resources to the young junior faculty so they can succeed. Do you see solutions?
So for me, this is where the mentors are really very important. Like in my case, my mentors at the department and also across different places, they share with me about where are those resources, because sometimes we don't know that there are resources there in terms of grant or network opportunity there. So they share with me this information. And also many of the times, they will help me connect to those resources.
Yeah.
So I think about for junior faculty member is at the very early stage, how can you build up a network of mentors to help you find those resources, to help you let you know about how do you get those resources, what are the skill set we need to develop as junior faculty member in order to get those resources. That mentorship group is really very important.
This is something that you brought up in the pre-interview. We talked a little bit about how there's often like an uneven expectation between like women and men when it comes to work. And in this podcast in particular, it's been brought up a lot. Women faculty will be asked to do things because there is a gender gap. We'll be asked to be on many more committees to have the diversity of voices to be represented. But when there are less women overall, then the women have to take on more of the burden of the work. So we talked a little bit about that.
You see that we observe that many of the times women are pulled into different committees, right? Serving all women of color are asked to serve on the DEI committees. So they actually have spend more time compared to the male faculty member. So I think this is some questions where first is as scholars, sometimes you need to say no. And this is some skill set my mentor also is teaching me is how to say no politely, because you need to protect your time for your other work and for your family. So first is you need to be brave to say no. And the second, also very important for me, I'm thinking a lot is if you ask women or women of color to serve in the DEI committee or other committee, how does that gonna incorporate into their promotion evaluation? How are you gonna link that with the kind of the service, the evaluation work they do? So this is where we need kind of more incorporation, thinking about how you design those matrix for the career promotion, right? And then the third thing is, many of the times you in those committee, we need to have responses, right? You ask people to serve in the committee and people discuss. How is the institution gonna give responses to the suggestion people raise in those committee? I think the responsiveness part, what do we mean by responsiveness to the DEI committee? What do we mean? How do we measure that? Both short-term and long-term. That's some of the question we need to think ahead of time in order to really think about how do we address this imbalance issue, time imbalance between, women and non-women faculty members. I think some of the things we can also think about is UW-Madison is really a wonderful place. We have the Wisconsin Idea. And actually last Monday was the Wisconsin Idea Conference. And I gave a talk there and people share a lot of wonderful projects, ideas. Really for people to implement Wisconsin ideas, doing the community engagement work, how do you provide resources to women of color faculty members to help them sustain their community engagement to really implement Wisconsin idea? That's also critical, I think.
Yeah, making that a priority.
Exactly, yeah. Because many of the times people who do community engagement are actually community from those underrepresented background. Right? They actually lack the resources compared to other people. And they are pulled into doing community engagement work because of their passion. But then how can you pair the resources to them?
Are there changes that you would like to see for women junior faculty in your field?
The major thing, I would like to see for women faculty is how do you think about community engagement work, like public service work? How do you encourage people to do that? Not just a woman, but people from different race, ethnicity, people from different level in their career. What are the resources you will provide to them for them to sustain their passion in terms of this engagement work? And that's a huge challenge. What are the matrix performance evaluation paired with resources we can think about for people to implement the Wisconsin idea? That's something I think we need more dialogues at the institutional level.
Knowing all you know now, what advice would you give to your younger self?
If there is a kind of like suggestion or maybe some encouragement I would give to my younger self and also give to women and people of color in doing the research academic in our field is really about be not fear about your failure. So don't make those failure try to kill your confidence, kill your passion. We always, like for myself, sometimes I just feel very tired of doing a lot of this work. But then I ask myself, why at the first hand I do that work? It's because we hold the value system, like for me, is to make social impact, really benefit different communities. Resources, is the value I hold. And thinking more about, what is not just to get lost in the day-to-day job we do, but to think broadly why we, at the first time, why we even choose this job, what are the value system which we hold to do this job. This will give us a broader picture. And then you can think about, in terms of priority of a different task, right? What will you choose? You know when to say no, right? So having this big picture about what is the value you want to create, not just within the 5 years, but next 10 years, what do you see yourself as a scholar in the field and in the society? Those bigger questions in terms of value and the impact. If we can kind of think a little bit, always keep that in mind, thinking ahead, that will give us a lot of guidance about the day-to-day job activity we do. Thinking in the long term, that's probably something which actually going to help you achieve the bigger impact we have in the future. So then the failure turns into opportunity, right?
Exactly. And that's our show. Thanks to our guest, Kaiping Chen, Assistant Professor in Life Sciences Communication at UW-Madison. And thanks to all of you listening in. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast with a friend.
You can find the Wisconsin Energy Institute at energy.wisc.edu and the Great Lakes Bioenergy Research Center at glbrc.org.
We'll see you next time on Propelling Women in Power. What is your superpower?
I think the greatest strength I have is I'm not fear of any fail in my life.